This program, on this particular program, I've reauthorized this program more than 30 times since September the 11th attacks.
Following the attacks of September the 11th, the President issued countless proclamations, executive orders, and signing statements, claiming powers never before imagined. Just how many programs does the President have? The New York Times reported in December 2005 that President Bush had authorized domestic spying and had bypassed the secret Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. As if it's not bad enough that the Chief Executive Officer of the United States is blatantly authorizing the violation of the civil liberties of its citizens, it took 3 years for this information to become news. Upon request of the executive branch, the New York Times withheld publication of the story. These events are reported to have occurred with the signing in 2002 of an alleged top-secret executive order authorizing the program. Again, which program? With this war on terror, the President has claimed the status of a maximum leader of sorts. It happens with all such declarations. Once you declare a war, the President then possesses superpowers. We've seen this countless times. The war on poverty saw President Johnson have legislative support to pass Great Society programs, and Reagan to the present administration have been able to capitalize the war on drugs to exact billions of taxpayer dollars with questionable at best results. What the results are is a war on freedoms. Even in today's times, we see constitutional guarantees of privacy being attacked by our very own government.
We're not mining or trolling through the personal lives of millions of innocent Americans. The privacy of ordinary Americans is fiercely protected in all our activities.
I was the one who brought forward some internal documents from AT&T which demonstrate an illegal installation, which I know from first-hand experience because I worked in that office. An installation that was installed at the behest of the National Security Agency, and its purpose was to tap into the prime internet cable track communications in San Francisco. And so they're basically tapping into the entire internet. To perform what they say they want to do, which is look at international traffic, none of this makes any sense. These installations only make sense if they're doing a huge, massive domestic dragnet on everybody in the United States.
In 1886, Supreme Court Justice Joseph P. Bradley, delivering the opinion of the court, said this: "It is not the breaking of his doors and the rummaging of his drawers that constitutes the essence of the offense, but it is the invasion of his indefeasible right of personal security, personal liberty, and private property." As evidenced, the Supreme Court recognizes an individual's right to privacy, but what does the word privacy actually mean? The American Heritage Dictionary defines privacy as the condition of being secluded from the presence or view of others, the state of being concealed, secrecy. So when we think of privacy, what we really mean is the right to be concealed, or the right to secrecy. According to a recent Associated Press story on Donald Kerr, the principal director of national intelligence said there was a new definition of privacy. Privacy can no longer mean anonymity. It should mean that government and businesses properly safeguard people's private communications and financial information. So if privacy can no longer mean anonymity, maybe we need to take a closer look at the meaning of the word anonymity. According to the American Heritage Dictionary, anonymity means the quality or state of being unknown or unacknowledged. Okay, let's put all of those words together. The term right to privacy really means the birthright of being concealed. Concealed from, yes, you guessed it, concealed from our federal government. But that's exactly what the principal director of national intelligence is asking the American people to throw away. We're being told that we must abandon our supreme right of being concealed and unmonitored by our government. If tapping into major telecommunications hubs and siphoning off the daily conversations of millions of Americans wasn't bad enough, think back to just right after September the 11th. The president asked for these extraordinary spying powers in order to prevent future attacks on the homeland. But what we didn't know then is that the Bush administration had already begun spying on Americans 7 months prior to the September 11th attacks. Shortly after the attacks, President Bush would ask Congress for legislation that would make his illegal spy programs perfectly legal under the president's new law. Remember, the USA Patriot Act was switched at the last minute with the president's personally approved and thoroughly unconstitutional version of the bill. So the president authorized the NSA to data mine the daily communications of every person in the United States at least 7 months before the 9/11 terror attacks took place.
First, our intelligence activities strictly target Al-Qaeda and their known affiliates.
As advertised by the Bush administration, if these new spying powers that were intended to stop terrorist attacks in the United States were already in full operation prior to September 11, 2001, then why didn't these methods stop those attacks? Is it possible that someone within the Bush administration could have prevented the attacks? And if so, why didn't they stop them from occurring? Is it even remotely conceivable that 9/11 could have been allowed to happen as a way to ensure that laws were enacted to protect illegal activities that were already set into motion months earlier by the Bush administration?
I have never, ever seen a Congress that seems so out of touch with its voters on both sides. They are now routinely ignoring the views of who they represent, and that includes Republicans. They've convinced Republicans and Democrats that they have literally no choice but to vote for their party. Whether they feel betrayed or not, they constantly say, who are you going to vote for? A Republican? Or are you going to vote for a Democrat? And so we find ourselves in the sort of throes of this red state, blue state paradigm, and there's no escape. And that's the reason there's this disconnect, because they have a monopoly over the political system.
Why should we fire Congress? Because they use the Constitution of the United States as a scrap of paper. They swear an oath to follow it, and then they reject it. That was their employment document. They haven't followed it. Congressmen, senators, you're fired.
Washington, you're fired!
Washington, you're fired.
Washington, D.C., you're fired.
I work with Republicans and Democrats to get things done.
If I was asked to sit down with the president, vice president, their staff, Congress, and the Senate, and why would I give them their walking papers? It would basically be this: they are not serving the interests of the people at large anymore.
When the Founding Fathers created the country, they didn't start with the Constitution. They finished with the Constitution. They started with the change. They started with getting the people in power who were causing problems out of power.
The founders of this country weren't particularly interested in political parties. They called them the factions, and they thought they would be the destruction of the country.
Firstly, I would get rid of every lobbyist in these United States. No more lobbyists.
We have got to hold Congress' feet to the fire. They are the only government entity authorized to declare war on another nation.
I don't know why we're there. I think it's a lie. It has nothing to do with 9/11.